What do a Ukrainian immigrant, a billionaire fraudster, and a technology that has died 7 times have in common? Sounds like the beginning of a bad joke, but this isn't an anecdote. It's a story where one man wanted to outrun time, another wanted to steal 8 billion, and the technology in between was just trying to survive. My name is Mr. Dark Web. I spent 3 weeks putting this story together piece by piece, and believe me, what I found surprised me. I've been investigating online for a number of years now. I've seen schemes that make your hair stand on end. I've watched empires built on lies crumble. But this story is different. Because usually, when a crypto coin drops 96%, when developers flee, when exchanges remove you from their listings, when the whole world writes your obituary, nobody comes back, and Solana is back. And here's what got me. It's not a story about technology. Or rather, it's not just about technology. It's a story about people. About an engineer who looked at Bitcoin and saw breaks, not revolution. About a fraudster who raised the project to the top with one hand and pushed it into the abyss with the other. About the thousands of developers who refused to leave the sinking ship. And about millions of ordinary people who lost money, hopes, and faith, and then, a year later, could not believe their eyes. When I started digging into this topic, I thought I would find another story about greed and stupidity. Crypto is full of such stories. Someone creates something, someone inflates it, the bubble bursts, everyone cries. It's classic. But the deeper I got into it, the more I realized it was more complicated than that. Let me outline the 3 points around which this story is built. Point 1 is the year 2017, San Diego. An engineer named Anatoly Yakovenko, who has worked at Qualcomm for 13 years, sits down to write a document that will change the industry. He's not a crypto enthusiast. He's not an idealist dreaming of a decentralized world. He's an engineer, and he sees a problem that no one else can solve. A problem of time. Point 2 is the year 2021, the Bahamas. A man named Sam Bankman-Fried, who everyone just calls SBF, posts a tweet. 5 words that will go down in history. He writes that he is willing to buy all Solana coins for $3 a piece, every single one of them. At that moment, it seems crazy. A year later, the coin will be worth $260. In another year, it'll be $8. And SBF himself will be in federal prison with a sentence of 25 years. Point 3, November 2022 year. The FTX empire collapses in 72 hours. $8 billion of client money disappears. And along with the throne of the king of cryptocurrencies, the project that everyone called Sam's coin goes to the bottom. Solana loses 96% of its value. Analysts write that this is the end. Developers are leaving en masse for Ethereum. Investors are writing off their losses. 3 points, 3 years, 1 story, but here's the rub. The story didn't end in 21-22. It was just beginning. You know what struck me most when I studied the materials? Not the magnitude of the fall, not the connection to the fraudster, not the technical glitches that caused the network to go down over and over again. What struck me was what was happening in the shadows while the world was burying Solana. While analysts were writing scathing articles, engineers were fixing the code. While traders panicked, developers continued to build applications. While the crypto community mocked the dead coin, someone was quietly buying it for $10 a piece. In September of the year 2023, something interesting happened. Visa, yes, the same Visa that processes payments worldwide, announced a partnership with Solana, not with Bitcoin, not with Ethereum, with a project that a year ago everyone thought was dead. And in January 2025, Solana reached a new historic high of almost $300 per coin. Those who bought it at the bottom for $8 increased their investments almost 40 times. But this is not a success story. Don't jump to conclusions, because behind every rise is a fall. Behind every resurrection are the scars that never went away. And behind every beautiful figure on the graph, there are people who lost everything and never got their money back. I'm going to tell you the story from the beginning. We're going to go from a garage in San Diego to the top of the crypto Olympus. We'll see how a deal with the devil can get you to the top, and how high you fall afterwards. Let's break down why a network that positioned itself as an Ethereum killer was crashing and rebooting so often that haters called it a database that can be restarted via Discord. And at the end, I will answer the ultimate question: is Solana really resurrected, or is it just a respite before the next fall? But first, we need to go back to the year 2177, San Diego, to the mind of a Ukrainian engineer who one night, after 2 cups of coffee and 1 beer, realized something important about time, and that idea changed everything. Anatoly Yakovenko was born in Ukraine in 1981. In the 1990s, his family emigrated to the United States, like thousands of other families seeking a better life after the collapse of the Soviet Union. As a teenager, he built computers and wrote code on early versions of Linux. Not for the money, for the interest. He graduated from the University of Illinois in 2003 with a degree in computer science. While he was still studying, he founded his first startup, a company dedicated to voice-over internet technology. The project didn't take off. The dot-com bubble had already burst, and investors were reluctant to invest in yet another technological experiment. But failure brought him to Qualcomm, the mobile technology giant in San Diego. That's where Yakovenko would spend the next 13 years. Operating systems, wireless protocols, data compression, distributed systems. He rose to the position of senior engineering manager and received 2 patents in the field of high-performance protocols. Why is that important? Because it was at Qualcomm that Yakovenko learned to think about time. You see, in mobile networks, timing is everything. When your phone communicates with a tower, the signals must alternate at strictly defined intervals. If 2 devices try to transmit at the same time, it's chaos, interference, loss of information. That's why there's a technology called time division multiple access. Each device gets its own time slot. No conflicts, no chaos. Yakovenko looked at this system every day, and one day he looked at Bitcoin. The year is 2017. Cryptocurrencies are on the rise. Everyone is talking about decentralization, about the future of finance, about revolution. Vitalik Buterin has launched Ethereum and is writing philosophical treatises on smart contracts. The crypto community discusses ideals. Yakovenko looks at the numbers. Bitcoin processes 7 transactions per second. 7. By comparison, Visa processes about 65,000. Ethereum is slightly better, 15 to 20 transactions per second. But that's still a turtle's pace by the standards of the global financial system. And this is where Yakovenko asked the question that changed everything. Why? Why is blockchain so slow? Not because computers are weak. It's not because the internet is slow. The problem is deeper than that. The problem is how the nodes in the network negotiate with each other. Imagine 1,000 computers scattered around the world. Each of them must agree on which transaction occurred first. But each computer has its own clock, and those clocks are not perfectly synchronized. There are millisecond differences. But when it comes to money, milliseconds make all the difference. Bitcoin solves this problem by brute force. Miners spend a huge amount of energy to proof of work. Proof of work. It's slow, expensive, and inefficient. But it works because it creates a single source of truth. Ethereum later moved to proof of stake. Proof of stake. It is faster, greener, but still requires nodes to constantly communicate with each other to agree on the order of transactions. Yakovenko looked at it and saw one thing: breaks. Endless negotiations between nodes. Endless waiting for consensus. Blockchain is like a very slow radio, where each participant has to wait his turn to say a word. And then one night in 2017, after 2 cups of coffee and a beer, the idea finally took shape. What if we don't make nodes negotiate time? What if we built time directly into the blockchain? He called it proof of history. Proof of history. I'll explain it in simple terms. Imagine you want to prove that an event happened at a certain moment. Usually you need a witness or an external source, a clock, a calendar, a stamp on a document. But in a decentralized system, there is no central source of time. There is no master clock that everyone trusts. Yakovenko proposed creating a cryptographic clock within the blockchain itself. Technically, this works through the so-called verifiable delay function. It sounds complicated, but the essence is simple. It is a mathematical operation that can only be performed sequentially, step by step. You can't take a shortcut. You can't calculate the result in advance. Each next step depends on the previous one. It's like a chain of dominoes. For the 100th knuckle to fall, all the previous 99 must fall. And you know exactly how much time has passed by which knuckle is lying down. Every transaction on the network receives a cryptographic timestamp, not from an external clock, from the chain of computation itself. And any node can instantly verify that this timestamp is real. That time has really passed. The result? Nodes no longer need to endlessly negotiate the order of transactions. The order is already embedded in the data itself. Consensus is reached many times faster. Yakovenko wrote a document about it, the so-called white paper. He published it in November 2017, and he started looking for people who would help bring the idea to life. The first to join was Greg Fitzgerald, a former colleague at Qualcomm. Then Stephen Ackridge, also from Qualcomm. Then Raj Gokul, who became Chief Operating Officer. 4 engineers with expertise in distributed systems, data compression, and high-performance protocols. The project was originally called Loom, but this name had already been used by another blockchain project. Then the team chose a new name in honor of Solana Beach in California, where Yakovenko liked to surf. The name stuck. Solana sounds like a name, and in a way, it was a name. The name of a technology that was going to be a game changer. In June 2021, Solana Labs raised $314 million in investment from Andreessen Horowitz and Polychain Capital. Serious names, serious money. Crypto world took notice, but the real launch took place even earlier, in March of the 2020th year. The network went live. The first unit was created on the 16th of March, and it became clear at once. Yakovenko was not joking about the speed. Test figures spoke of 50,000 transactions per second. Later, about 65,000. By comparison, Bitcoin is 7, Ethereum is 15. The difference is thousands of times, and the transaction cost is a fraction of a cent. Not tens of dollars like on Ethereum during peak hours, fractions of a cent. The crypto community was divided. Some shouted, "Ethereum killer," and bought up tokens. Others shook their heads and said that it was too good to be true. That speed would have to be paid for. That decentralization would suffer. That it's not a real blockchain, just a fast database. Looking ahead, both were right in their own way. But in the 2020th and 21st year, Solana was on a horse. The price of SOL token grew like on yeast, from 20 cents at the start to $260 at the peak in November 2021. Growth of 1,300 times in a year and a half. Developers are pouring into the ecosystem. NFT marketplaces, decentralized exchanges, games, apps. Solana has become a second home for those tired of slow and expensive Ethereum. And it was at that moment, at the height of fame, at the pinnacle of hype, that he appeared in history. The man who offered to buy all coins for $3. The man who in 2 years will be called the biggest fraudster in the history of cryptocurrencies, Sam Bankman-Fried. On the 9th of January in the year 2021, a post appeared on the platform, which was then still called Twitter. The author was Sam Bankman-Fried, the founder of the crypto exchange FTX. 5 words and 1 number. "I'll buy as many souls as you have, right now, $3 each. Sell me everything, and then go to hell." Rude? Yes. Provocative? Absolutely. But that's what SBF was saying. He wasn't playing by the rules of decorum. He was playing by his own rules. And in January of 2121, those rules worked. Who's Sam Bankman-Fried? At the time, a rising star in the crypto world, 29-year-old wunderkind from a family of Stanford professors, MIT grad, founder of trading firm Alameda Research and the FTX exchange, a man who built a $32 billion empire in a couple of years. He wore crumpled t-shirts and shorts to business meetings, slept on a sack chair in the office. He played video games on investor calls, and still managed to convince serious people to invest billions in him. His thing was so-called effective altruism, the philosophy that one should first earn as much money as possible and then spend it to save the world. Charity through wealth. It's a beautiful idea. Forbes and Fortune magazines wrote rave profiles about him. He's been compared to a young Warren Buffett. But we're interested in something else. His relationship with Solana. SBF saw something in Solana that others did not. Or rather, he saw it before anyone else did. Speed, cheapness, potential for high-frequency trading. For a man who had built his career on arbitrage and algorithmic trading, it was the perfect tool. And he sprang into action. Alameda Research, an SBF trading firm, has become one of the largest early investors in Solana. By various estimates, SBF companies have bought up between 50 and 60 million SOL tokens. That's 10 to 15% of the entire supply. Imagine, one person controls 1/10 of an entire economy, but SBF didn't just buy, it was building. In August 2020, he launched Serum, a decentralized exchange on the Solana blockchain. It was an ambitious project, completely on-chain trading, an order book right on the blockchain, speed that no competitor on Ethereum could offer. Serum has become the flagship of the Solana ecosystem. Dozens of other projects have grown around it. Radium, Mango Markets, Orca, a whole universe of decentralized finance. And at the center of this universe was SBF. FTX sponsored Solana hackathons, invested in startups building on its blockchain, promoted Sol on its exchange. Solana ecosystem tokens even got an unofficial name, Sam Coins. Sam Coins, Do you understand what was happening? One person simultaneously owned a huge amount of tokens, built the key infrastructure of the ecosystem, and actively promoted the project through the largest exchange. That's not an investor, that's an architect, or, if you prefer, a puppeteer. And the puppet danced. In 2021, the price of Sol skyrocketed from $3 in January, remember that tweet, to $260 in November, an increase of almost 90 times in 10 months. People who listened to SBF and didn't sell their $3 coins to him became millionaires. The capitalization of Solana has reached $74 billion. The project became one of the top 5 largest cryptocurrencies. Yakovenko and his team became stars of the industry. They were greeted like rock stars at conferences, but every fairy tale has a dark side. You see, the SBF connection wasn't just luck, it was an addiction. Solana didn't just grow because of technology. It grew because of the money, influence, and hype that one person generated. And the higher it rose, the stronger that connection became. When a journalist asked about blockchain prospects, SBF said, Solana. When an investor was looking for an alternative to Ethereum, SBF said, Solana. When a startup chose a platform to launch on, SBF said Solana and backed it up with investment. It was a win-win for everyone. Solana got users, money, and reputation. SBF got an increase in the value of its assets and control over an entire ecosystem. A classic symbiosis. But there is another type of relationship in nature, parasitism. When one organism lives at the expense of another, and when the host dies, the parasite looks for a new victim, and the old host just dies. In 21 or 21, nobody thought about it. Everyone was too busy counting their profits. There were, of course, skeptics. People who pointed out the warning signs, like the fact that Solana's network periodically went down. Completely. Just stopped working. On the 14th of September in the year 2021, the first major incident. The launch of the new token created such a flood of transactions that the network choked. The validators failed. The blockchain stopped for 17 hours. 17 hours. Imagine your bank closed in the middle of the day and didn't open until the next morning because too many customers came in. The crypto community reacted caustically. What kind of blockchain is this that you can switch off? Decentralization, you say. It's not a blockchain. It's a SQL database with a token. The Solana team recognized the problem, explained it with technical details, promised to fix it. And indeed they did. They made improvements. But the residue remained. And then it happened again, and again, and again. May 2022, a 7-hour failure due to a bot attack. June, a 4-hour crash due to a bug in transaction processing. September, an 8-hour crash due to a bug in the fork selection algorithm. Every time the team fixed it, every time they explained, every time the haters laughed, and every time the price dropped a little bit and then recovered, because the hype was stronger, because the SBF money kept flowing, because the ecosystem kept growing. But one person in the crypto community started asking uncomfortable questions, not about Solana, about FTX. On the 2nd of November 2022, CoinDesk published an article. The journalist had access to the internal documents of Alameda Research, an SBF trading firm, and what they saw was mind-boggling. Alameda's balance sheet consisted mainly of FTT tokens, the FTX exchange's own cryptocurrency. In other words, SBF was not backed by real assets, but by tokens that it created itself. It's like a bank saying, yes, we have money. Here they are. Tokens printed by us. The article blew up the market, but the real bomb exploded a few days later. On the 6th of November, Changpeng Zhao, the head of the largest crypto exchange Binance, announced that his company will sell all of its FT tokens. All of them. That was a signal. A signal that one of the major market players does not trust FTX. Panic started. FTX users rushed to withdraw funds. In 24 hours, $6 billion. The exchange could not cope. On the 8th of November, the withdrawal of funds stopped. On the 11th of November, FTX declared bankruptcy. $8 billion of client money disappeared. It would later turn out that SBF used the depositors' money to cover Alameda Research's losses, for personal investments, to buy property in the Bahamas, for political donations. On the 12th of December, Sam Bankman-Fried was arrested. The charges are fraud, money laundering, and violation of campaign finance law. The maximum sentence was over 100 years in prison. He ended up getting 25, but that would come later. And in November 2022, the whole world was watching the collapse of the empire. And along with the empire, the project, which everyone called Sam's coin, went down. Solana. In 1 week, the price of Sol has collapsed 60%, from $37 to less than $10. By the end of the year, down to $8. The drop from the all-time high was 96%. $40 billion of capitalization has evaporated. Not in a year, not in a month, in weeks. Serum, the flagship exchange that SBF built, came to a halt. It turned out that the keys to the smart contracts were controlled by FTX. When the empire collapsed, the exchange was reduced to rubble. Projects have started to leave. D-Gods and Weijo Ortiz, the largest NFT collections on Solana, announced that they were moving to Ethereum and Polygon. Developers switched to competitors en masse. Venture funds, which had been flooding the ecosystem with money just yesterday, turned their backs. A new meme has appeared in the crypto community. Solana is a blockchain that can be reloaded via Discord. Only now a subheading has been added, and which belonged to a fraudster. I remember the forums of those days. Rage, despair. People who had lost their life savings. People who believed in technology and found themselves in the same boat as the industry's biggest fraudster. One user wrote, "I invested $40,000. Now I have $1,600 left. I'm up for the third night. I don't know what to tell my wife." Another, "That's funny. I didn't sell at $260 because I believed in the technology. Now the technology is worth $8. That's a great lesson." 3. Solana is dead. We can disperse. Most agreed. Analysts wrote obituaries. Experts explained why the project would never recover. Too strong an association with FTX. Too many failures. Too little credibility. But someone disagreed. Someone kept writing code. Someone kept fixing bugs. Someone kept building. In silence. Without hype. Without venture capital money. Continued to believe that the technology was not the person who promoted it. And while the world was burying Solana, these men were preparing a resurrection. December of the year 2022. CryptoZyme is in full swing. Bitcoin fell from 69,000 to 16,000. Ether lost 70%, but no major project suffered as much as Solana. $8 a token. Capitalization is $3 billion. A year ago it was 74. The maths is simple, minus 96%. The Solana Labs office in San Francisco has become quiet, not because everyone had left, although many had, because those who stayed were just working. No interviews, No high-profile announcements, no promises. Anatoly Yakovenko would later tell in an interview, "A lot of people wrote Solana off. They thought it was the end. But what never changed? No one from the key team left. Everyone kept building." Lily Liu, president of the Solana Foundation, is even harsher. "A lot of people were convinced we were dead, a dead thing on the side of the road. But guess what? Corpses don't write code. We did." What exactly were they doing? Firstly, we fixed what was broken. Network failures, Solana's main headache, required a systemic solution. The team redesigned anti-spam protection mechanisms. They introduced prioritized commissions. Users could now pay a little more to make their transactions go faster at times of load. Improve the data transfer protocol between nodes. In February 2023, there was another failure. Almost 20 hours of downtime. Haters gloated. But that was the last major incident. After that, the network operated without serious problems for more than a year. Secondly, the team started working on the FireDancer project, a fully independent client for validators. Before that, all Solana nodes ran on the same software. One bug could put the entire network down. FireDancer, which was developed by Jump Crypto, was supposed to fix that. 2 different clients, 2 different codes. If one goes down, the other keeps running. This is not a quick fix. FireDancer has been in development for over 2 years, but the very fact that they worked on it during the darkest period of Solana's history speaks volumes. Third, and perhaps most unexpectedly, in December 2022, right in the middle of a disaster, memcoin appeared in the Solana ecosystem. It's called Bonk, dog theme, like Dogecoin and Shiba Inu. No practical use, just a meme. But the creators of Bonk did something clever. They gave away tokens for free to everyone who continued to use Solana. Developers, NFT artists, holders of certain collections, active members of the community. It was a gesture, a symbol, a message. We're still here, we're not giving up, and we're having fun no matter what. Bonk didn't save Solana, but it did something important. It reminded people that the ecosystem is alive, that it has a community, that it can create something new even in the ruins. By the spring of 2023, the first signs of thaw began to appear. The ETH-OL price has stabilized around $20 to $25. Not much, but not $8 anymore. Developers who left for Ethereum have started to come back. Some quietly, some loudly, with statements that they jumped to conclusions. But the real turning point came in September. On the 5th of September, 2023, Visa, yes, the same Visa that processes 65,000 transactions per second, announced the expansion of its stablecoin infrastructure, and it chose Solana as one of its platforms. Not Bitcoin, not Ethereum. Solana. Think about it. A year ago, this network was being buried. They called it a fraudulent coin. And now the world's largest payment system makes real payments through it with partners like WorldPay and Nuvei. The head of Visa's crypto division explained the choice simply: speed and cost. A transaction on Solana costs a fraction of a cent and takes 400 milliseconds. For corporate transfers, this is ideal. The news spread instantly. And although it was a pilot partnership, the symbolic significance can hardly be overestimated. If Visa trusts Solana, maybe it's not really dead. The market reacted. The price of Sol began to rise. $30, $40, $50. And then October happened. In mid-October, Bloomberg published an article about the possible approval of a Bitcoin ETF. an exchange-traded fund that would allow institutional investors to legally invest in the cryptocurrency. The news turned out to be premature, but the market has already caught fire. Bitcoin went up, followed by altcoins, and Solana was among the leaders of growth. By the end of November, the SOL was worth $110. The increase since the beginning of the year is almost 1,000%. People who bought at the bottom at $8 to $10 increased their investments 10 to 12 times. One trader wrote on the forum, "I bought SOL in January for $9. Everyone said, 'Idiot, this is a dead project. You will lose everything.' Now it's November. I haven't sold anything. And you know what? The idiot has the last laugh." Another was more restrained. "Yes, the price has gone up, but I remember those who bought at 200 and are still in the negative. It's too early to celebrate." And he was right. Despite the impressive growth, SOL was still worth half of its all-time high. Those who had entered at the peak of the HYP in 2021 were still sitting on losses. But the trend was clear. Solana was coming back. The 2024 year continued the revival story. In January, the price broke through the $120 mark. In March, $150. By November, it was over $200. What's changed? Firstly, the network has become more stable. In the entire 2024 year, there was only one major outage in February, and that lasted less than 5 hours. Compare that to 5 or 6 incidents a year at the peak of the problem. Progress is evident. Second, the ecosystem has grown. The total value of assets locked in Solana protocols, the so-called TVL, grew from $1.5 billion at the beginning of the year to over $6 billion by autumn, a quadrupling in 10 months. Thirdly, new applications have emerged. Memcoins, yes, oddly enough, became one of the drivers of growth. Pump.fun, a platform for creating memcoins, processed millions of transactions daily. Not the most serious use of technology, but the money, quite serious. Fourth, institutional players are back. Investment funds have started to include SOL in their portfolios again. According to CoinShares, inflows into Solana-based products were in the tens of millions of dollars weekly. And FTX, the company that almost buried Solana? Ironically, SOL tokens, which were owned by FTX and Alameda, rose in value so much that they were now helping to pay off creditors. The very coins that SBF had bought up for $3, which had depreciated to $8, were now worth over $200. FTX's bankrupt mass turned into a gold mine, thanks in large part to SOL. Some called it poetic justice. Some called it luck. In January 2025, Solana reached a new historic high of almost $300 per token, higher than at the peak of the hype in 2021, higher than ever before. Those who bought at the bottom made 30 to 40 times what they invested. The resurrection has taken place. But the story doesn't end there, because behind every beautiful graph are questions that remain unanswered, risks that go nowhere, lessons that many never learned. And if you think this is a happy ending, I must disappoint you. I started this investigation 3 weeks ago. I thought I'd tell a story about greed and collapse, another crypto drama with a predictable ending. But the deeper I dug, the more complex the picture became. Solana is not a success story, nor is it a story of failure. It's a story of survival. And survivors always have scars. Let's face it. Yes, the price has recovered. Yes, the network is more stable. Yes, Visa and other major players have recognized the technology. But does that mean that all problems have been solved? No, it doesn't. The first scar is centralization. Critics have been pointing this out since the beginning, and their arguments haven't gone anywhere. To run the Solana validator, you need serious hardware. Not a home computer, but a professional server with a powerful processor. Lots of RAM and fast internet. It costs money, a lot of money. The result? The number of validators on the Solana network is measured in the hundreds. On the Ethereum network, it's in the hundreds of thousands. That's a difference of 3 orders of magnitude. The fewer validators, the higher the risk that a small group of players can influence the network. The Solana team disagrees. Quality is more important than quantity. Their validators are professionals with reliable equipment. The network is faster precisely because it doesn't try to cater to every laptop owner. Who's right? Depends on whether you value speed or decentralization more. But the very fact that this argument continues speaks volumes. The second scar is reputation. The association with FTX and SBF hasn't gone anywhere. Yes, time heals. Yes, the crypto community is famous for its short memory. But try to explain to a person far from crypto what Solana is. Sooner or later, the question will come up. Isn't this the coin that was linked to that scammer? Raj Gokal, co-founder of Solana, said in an interview, FTX is far in the rearview mirror. Maybe, but the rearview mirror exists precisely to remember what's left behind. The third scar is technical risks. The network has become more stable, that's a fact. But more stable does not mean flawless. In December of the year 2025, Solana was subjected to the most powerful DDoS attack, 6 terabits per second, one of the largest attacks in the history of the internet. The network survived. Yakovenko called it a bullish signal. If someone spends such resources on an attack, it means that we are important enough. That's an optimistic view. But we can look at it another way. A network that attracts attacks of this magnitude must be prepared for even bigger ones, and no one can guarantee that the next attack won't be successful. The fourth scar is addiction to hype. A look at what's driving the Solana ecosystem today. Meme coins, speculative tokens, pump fun and similar platforms. It brings transactions, commissions, activity. But it's not fundamental value. It's a casino. When, not if but when, interest in meme coins fades, what will be left? Serious DeFi protocols? They're out there. NFT marketplaces? They're there too. But will there be enough to sustain the ecosystem without speculative fuel? I don't know. Nobody does. The fifth scar is the war with the state. In June of 23, the SEC filed suit. Legally, it was called fighting unregistered securities. In fact, it was an attempt to cut off the oxygen. The market, as always, panicked. Analysts predicted delistings. Funds wrote down assets at a loss. It seemed that there was no chance against the state machine. But the reality turned out to be more prosaic. In February of the 25th, the SEC simply withdrew the suit, quietly, routinely. No big announcements or explanations. The case was dropped, and that's the whole point. While lawyers argued in their offices and investors drank valerian, the network continued to generate blocks. A code doesn't care what the IRS or SEC thinks of it. He knows no fear, it just works. I'm not telling you all this to scare you. I'm not telling you all this to scare you or to discourage you from doing anything or to encourage you to take action. I'm telling you because an honest story is a story with all the details, not just the pretty growth charts. Now let's talk about people. In the 3 weeks I've been working on this piece, I've read hundreds of posts on forums, social media, and chat rooms. Stories of people who have gone through all this. Somebody lost everything. Invested their savings at the peak in 2021 when the SOL was worth $200+. held it when it went down, kept holding when it went down to 8, and then, when my nerves gave out, sold it, just before it started to rise. It's a classic story. Bought high, sold low, lost 80%. Someone made a fortune. Bought at the bottom without listening to the experts who were burying the project. Waited for a recovery. Came out with a profit of thousands of percent. Now he tells his story as an example of his genius. Although, to be honest, it is almost impossible to distinguish between genius and luck in cryptocurrencies. Somebody got their own. In, out, no gain, no loss. Just watch the roller coaster ride from the sidelines. And some still do. Bought it long ago, survived all the downs, all the ups, all the scandals, and still holds on. Not because he believes in getting rich quick. It's because he believes in technology. Here's what one such person told me. A developer who has been building applications on Solana since 2021. People look at the price and think that's what the project is. But the price is just a number. Noise. A project is code that works. Applications that solve problems. A community that builds. Everything else is speculation. Maybe he's right, or maybe he's just too deeply entrenched to see the picture objectively. I'm not going to judge. What does this story teach us? Lesson 1. Connections solve everything until they become a curse. SBF took Solana to the top, and he almost buried her. When your biggest ally turns out to be a fraud, you pay for their sins, even if it's not your fault. Lesson 2. Technology is not a guarantee. Solana is really fast, really cheap, really innovative, but that didn't protect it from a 96% drop. Good technology can lose out to bad PR. Lesson 3. The dead sometimes come back, but not all of them. Solana is back. Hundreds of other projects that were buried in 2022 remained in the grave. Why did Solana survive and they didn't? A strong team? A dedicated community? Luck? Probably all of the above. But there's no way to repeat this journey by the book. Lesson 4. No one knows the future. The experts who buried Solana in 2022 were wrong. But the experts who predicted its eternal growth in 2021 were wrong too. Anyone who tells you they know exactly where the price will go is either lying or deluded. The fifth lesson, and perhaps the most important one, is that it is not the smartest and luckiest who survive in cryptocurrencies. It is those who are prepared for the worst. Those who do not invest more than they can lose. Those who realize that everything could go to zero tomorrow and take this risk consciously. I began this story by asking, what do a Ukrainian immigrant, a billionaire fraudster, and a technology that has died 7 times have in common? I can answer that now. All 3 are part of the same game. A game in which geniuses and fraudsters are sometimes indistinguishable from each other, where technology rises and falls according to laws that have nothing to do with its real value, where you can be a millionaire in a year and a pauper in a week. Solana is a mirror. It reflects everything in the world of cryptocurrencies, innovation and hype, genius and fraud, hope and greed, triumph and disaster. My name is Mr. Darkweb. This was a story of Solana, a technology that made a deal with the devil, survived its own death, and came back. On the 9th of November, 2025, President Trump promised every American $2,000 in dividends from tariff revenues. In 24 hours, Bitcoin soared to $103,000. Telegram channels exploded with statements. The state debt will be written off through crypto. Also, according to the latest data for October 2025, it is known that the company Tether holds $135 billion in U.S. Treasury bonds. That's more than Germany holds. The private cryptocurrency corporation is one of the largest creditors of the U.S. government. My name is Mr. Darkweb, and today you will find out who will actually pay for the cancellation of the American debt. I have been running this channel for almost a year now. During that time, I have talked about darknet markets, pyramid schemes, money laundering schemes, and cryptocurrencies. But what happened on the 9th of November fell out of all the categories. It wasn't a one-man scam. It wasn't a hacker attack. It was not a pyramid scheme that would collapse in 6 months. It was more than that. After Trump's statement, there was euphoria in crypto channels. Some wrote that a financial revolution had begun. Someone predicted that Bitcoin would soar to $500,000. Someone swore that the U.S. government would transfer all debt to blockchain and start from scratch. I went on Reddit. The pattern was the same there. Thousands of posts, millions of views. Everyone was discussing one thing: writing off the national debt through crypto. But when I started digging, I realized no one explains the mechanics. No one shows you the numbers. Everyone talks about emotions, hopes, fears. But no one answers a simple question. How exactly can $37 trillion of debt be canceled through cryptocurrency? I decided to look into it. The first thing I did was to pull up the public reports of the largest stablecoin companies. What I saw shocked me. Tether, a company most ordinary people have never heard of, held $135 billion in U.S. treasuries. That's more than Germany holds, more than Australia holds, more than South Korea. Then I checked the data from Circle, the company that issues the second largest USDC stablecoin. Another 45 to 55 billion. BlackRock, Franklin Templeton, tokenized treasuries, 2 billion more. Collectively, private crypto companies held about $200 billion of U.S. government debt. $200 billion, and it all happened quietly. No noise, no headlines in the newspapers. While the whole world was discussing Bitcoin and meme coins, crypto corporations turned into the largest creditors of the most powerful economy on the planet. But that wasn't the most interesting part. On the 18th of July, 2025, President Trump signed into law Genius Act, an act to guide and create national innovation for U.S. stablecoins. The first federal law in the history of the country to regulate stablecoins. It was supported by Democrats and Republicans. 68 votes in favor in the Senate, 308 in the House of Representatives. A rare unanimity in an era of polarization. The law required that issuers of stablecoins do one simple thing: hold reserves in low-risk assets, treasury bonds, bank deposits, repos, 1-to-1. For every token, $1 of collateral. Sounds safe, doesn't it? But I dug deeper, and I found an interesting detail. The law forbidden issuers from paying interest to token holders, so Tether earns 5% per annum on $135 billion. That's almost $7 billion in net profit, and USDT holders get zero. Zero. Your money works for the American government. The company makes billions, and you get the convenience of being able to quickly transfer dollars between exchanges. But convenience is not a dividend. I realized this is not a con in the classic sense. There's no white cat villain laughing in an underground lair. There's a system. Legal, transparent, public, but it's no less dangerous. I decided to do a full investigation, trace the path of the money, Find out who started the debt cancellation narrative. Find out what's really going on. And most importantly, to answer the question, who pays? Because in finance, someone always pays. Always. What I have found in recent weeks has changed my understanding of the modern financial system. This is not a story of collapse. It's not a story about fraud. It's a story about evolution. It's about how $37 trillion of debt changes form without changing substance, and about how millions of people around the world have become part of this system without even knowing it. The 9th of November in the year 2025, Sunday, morning in America, evening in Europe, night in Asia. At 2:30 in the afternoon Eastern Time, a post appeared on the True Social platform. The author is Donald Trump, the 47th President of the United States. The text was short but succinct. Trump wrote that America has become the richest and most respected country in the world because of his tariff policies, near zero inflation, record stock market prices, 401k retirement accounts at historic highs, and then the key phrase, a dividend of at least $2,000 per person, not including high-income earners, will be paid to everyone. 24 words, 240 characters, but the effect was instantaneous. 15 minutes later, Bitcoin began to rise. $100,000, $101,000, $102. By late afternoon in New York, the price had reached $103,000, up almost 2% in 24 hours. Ethereum up to 3,500 ME plus 4.5%. Solana, XRP, other altcoins, all in the green zone. The crypto community has exploded. Hundreds of posts have appeared on Telegram feeds. Stimulus checks are coming back. Some wrote. State debt cancellation has begun, others claimed. Some recalled the year 2020, when the government sent out $1,200 per person during a pandemic. Then Bitcoin went from 3,800 to 69,000 in 1 year. Can history repeat itself? Popular financial account. The Kobisi letter published a post calling "What is Happening?" effectively a new round of stimulus checks. More than 85% of American adults will qualify for a payout. That's over $400 billion that will flood into the economy. Anthony Pompliano, a well-known crypto investor with an audience of millions, wrote that if Trump does give away $2,000 of tariff revenue, history will look back on the April panic of 2025 as one of the silliest consensuses in history. He added that not only would the tariffs not cause inflation, they would strengthen the American economy. Analyst Lark Davis compared the situation to the 20th year. Back then, incentives of $1,200 led to Bitcoin's growth by 50% in 5 weeks and by 900% in a year. True, Davis warned that we shouldn't expect such a crazy rally this time around, but the new stimulus checks should not be ignored either. Kashif Raza, another popular crypto analyst, recalled the effects of past stimulus. In 2021, inflation jumped 10%. He urged the crypto community to prepare for a tsunami of inflation and called Bitcoin a hedge against the depreciation of money. Reddit, Twitter, YouTube, everywhere was discussing the same thing. The national debt will be canceled through crypto. A financial revolution has begun. Bitcoin is the salvation from the collapse of the dollar. But amidst the euphoria, there were skeptics. By the same evening, ABC had aired an interview with Finance Minister Scott Bessent. Host George Stephanopoulos asked a direct question about dividends. Bessent answered evasively. He said a $2,000 dividend can take many forms. It could be the tax deductions that are already in the president's agenda, eliminating the tip tax, the overtime tax, Social Security, the auto loan deduction. In other words, these may not be direct payments, but tax savings. Bessent also acknowledged that he has not yet spoken to Trump about a specific dividend plan. Experts have started counting. Erica York of the Tax Foundation has published a calculation. If the high income threshold is set at $100,000 a year, about 150 million American adults will be eligible for the payment. The cost of the program is almost $300 billion. If children are included, the figure rises to $600 billion. The problem is that tariffs collected significantly less. According to the Treasury Department, in the 2025 fiscal year, tariffs brought in $195 billion, with $1 of tariff revenue offsetting only 24 cents of lost income and payroll tax revenue. The net revenue was only $90 billion, $300 billion in expenditures against $90 billion in revenues. The maths didn't add up. The Committee for a Responsible Federal Budget released a report. If you pay a dividend of $2,000 annually, it would add $6 trillion to the deficit over 10 years. Twice as much as tariffs would bring in over the same period. Economists warned that if all the tariff revenues were used for dividends, there would be no money left for deficit reduction. And that's exactly what Trump promised. We're about to start paying off our massive $37 trillion debt. But the markets ignored the skeptics. Bitcoin held above 103,000. The next day, on the 10th of November, it rose to 105,000. The crypto market capitalization grew by 4.5% overnight, exceeding $3.5 trillion. There was other news that fueled enthusiasm. Michael Saylor, founder of MicroStrategy and one of the largest corporate holders of Bitcoin, published a cryptic post, "Better keep it up." His company owned 641,000 Bitcoins worth $65 billion. The crypto community took this as a hint. Saylor was getting ready to buy more. But while everyone was looking at Bitcoin, few noticed the other news. On the same day, the 9th of November, several major financial publications published stories about stablecoins. The data was public, but few people had paid attention to it before. Now, against the backdrop of Trump's dividend announcement and talk of debt relief, the figures sounded new. Tether, the company that issues the largest stablecoin USDT, held $135 billion in U.S. treasuries. That's more than South Korea, Germany, Australia. Tether ranked 17th among all holders of U.S. debt in the world. 17th. A private company incorporated in the Cayman Islands held more U.S. debt than entire countries. And then there was Circle, the issuer of the second largest USDC stablecoin, 45 to 55 billion in treasuries. BlackRock with the BuIdle tokenized fund. Franklin Templeton with on-chain U.S. government money fund. About 2 billion more. All told, about $200 billion of U.S. government debt is in the hands of crypto companies. And that number was growing. In the first quarter of the year 2025, Tether bought $65 billion worth of treasuries, more than Canada did in the entire 2024 year. Some analysts have begun to wonder if there might be something to the talk of debt cancellation via crypto. Not literally, of course, but something is happening. Something is changing. And while the crypto community celebrated the rise of Bitcoin and dreamed of $2,000 dividends, few thought about a simple question. Where did Tether get $135 billion? Who gave that money? Where did they go? But what I discovered next made me check my own crypto wallet. I started with public data. It's rare in the cryptocurrency world, but stablecoin companies are required to publish reserve reports, usually once a quarter. They are audited by audit firms. Tether's report for the fourth quarter of the 2024 year came out on the 31st of January, 2025. The figure was impressive: $113 billion in U.S. Treasuries, direct and indirect investments. But that was just the beginning. In May, the company released its first quarter figures: $120 billion. In one quarter, Tether bought $65 billion worth of treasuries. That's more than Canada, Taiwan, or Mexico bought in the entire 2024 year. July, $127 billion. October is $135. Tether overtook South Korea and ranked 17th among all holders of U.S. government debt in the world. Above it were only the largest economies on the planet, and a few financial centers like the Cayman Islands and Luxembourg, where hedge funds are registered. But Tether is not a country. It's a private company. CEO Paulo Arduino regularly published posts emphasizing the significance of these figures. He wrote that Tether supports U.S. economic influence and plays a key role in maintaining the dollar's dominance in global trade. $135 billion in treasuries is not just reserves. It is an instrument of American financial power. It sounded patriotic. But patriotism didn't explain a simple thing: how the mechanics work. When you buy a USDT token for $1, that dollar isn't sitting in a safe deposit box. Tether takes it and buys U.S. Treasury bonds. In effect, the company is making a loan to the U.S. government. The government pays interest, about 5% per annum. On $135 billion, that's about $7 billion of profit a year. You get a token. 1 USDT equals $1. In theory, you can exchange it back at any time. The government gets the credit, Tether gets the interest, and you get the convenience. Essentially, when you hold the USDT, you're holding the dollar. Almost. The difference is that your dollar works. It funds the U.S. government. Only the interest from that work doesn't go to you. It's neither good nor bad. It's just the mechanics of the system. But Tether wasn't alone. Circle, the company that issues the second largest USDC stablecoin, held between $45 and $55 billion in treasuries. USDC's market capitalization grew by $19 billion in 2024. Circle positioned itself as a more transparent and regulated alternative to Tether. Then there were tokenized treasury bond funds. BlackRock launched Boydell Fund, a tokenized money market fund. Franklin Templeton created the on-chain U.S. government money fund. Ondo Finance offered similar products. The total capitalization of such funds was about $2 billion. It was a small figure compared to stablecoins, but the trend was obvious. Traditional financial giants were also getting into the game. In total, stablecoin companies and tokenized funds held around $200 billion of U.S. government debt. $200 billion. By comparison, that's more than Germany, Australia, and the UAE combined. It is more than the annual GDP of Greece or Portugal. And those $200 billion didn't come from governments. It came from regular people, cryptocurrency traders, from companies using stablecoins for international transfers, from those who stored dollars digitally, unaware that they were actually funding the U.S. government. Every USDT or USDC holder is an unwitting creditor of the U.S. Stablecoin transaction volume exceeded $4 trillion in 2024, more than Visa. Stablecoins have become one of the largest payment instruments in the world, and almost half of that, about 170 billion, was backed by U.S. government debt. I looked at the numbers and realized it's not a scam. All the reports are in the public domain. All the figures are audited. All the mechanisms are described in the company's white papers. But that made the picture even more disturbing. The system worked perfectly. Millions of people around the world voluntarily financed U.S. government debt, receiving in return the convenience of fast transfers. Issuers made billions. The government got cheap credit. Everyone was happy. But there was one detail that I discovered further on. On the 18th of July in the year 2025, an event took place that transformed this system from a market phenomenon into official state policy. And what I learned about this event changed the whole picture. The 18th day of July in the year 2025, Friday, Washington. The U.S. House of Representatives voted in favor of the Bill S. 1582. 308 votes in favor, 122 against. Democrats and Republicans together. In an era when Congress can't even agree on a budget, such unanimity was rare. The next day, the 19th of July, President Trump signed the law. Official title: Guiding and Establishing National Innovation for U.S. Stablecoins Act. Acronym: Genius Act. Guiding and Establishing National Innovation for U.S. Stablecoins Act. The first ever federal law to regulate stablecoins in the nation's history. The Senate approved it back on the 17th of June. 68 in favor, 30 against. 51 Republicans and 17 Democrats. The House of Representatives passed the Senate version without amendment. A rare case where both chambers agreed the first time around. Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent called the law transformational for the financial industry. SEC Chairman Paul Atkins said that stablecoins will play a significant role in the securities industry, comptroller of the currency. Jonathan Gould said the law will expand his agency's authority and open a new chapter in financial services. Everyone praised. Everyone was supportive. But what did this law actually say? The main idea was simple: to legalize stablecoins as an official financial instrument. Before that, they existed in a gray zone, formally not prohibited, but not regulated either. Now there were clear rules. The law introduced the concept of a permitted payment stablecoin issuer. In order to issue stablecoins in the U.S., regulatory approval was required. 3 ways: through the Office of the Comptroller of the Currency for non-banking companies, through a bank subsidiary, or through the state, if the issue volume is less than $10 billion. Key requirement: reserves are 1-to-1. For each token issued, $1 of collateral. But not every provision was suitable. The law allowed only low-risk assets: cash, deposits in insured banks, short-term U.S. Treasury bonds, repo transactions with treasuries, money market funds with government securities, and reserves at the central bank. In fact, the law made treasury bonds a mandatory part of the stablecoin system, whereas before Tether could theoretically hold reserves in anything: gold, corporate bonds, real estate. Now the choice is narrowed. You want to work in the U.S.? Buy treasuries. The law also required monthly publication of the composition of reserves, audited quarterly reports, and annual financial statements for issuers above $50 billion. Transparency, reliability, stability. It sounded reasonable, but there was one detail. The law forbid issuers from paying interest or any return to holders of stablecoins, an outright prohibition. No interest, no yield, nothing. It was a critical moment that many missed. Imagine, Tether holds $135 billion in U.S. Treasury bonds. The interest rate is about 5% per annum. That's about $6.5 to $7 billion of income per year. In 2024 year, Tether earned $13 billion in net profit, a record, more than many banks, and USDT holders got zero. When you buy USDT, you're actually giving money to Tether, which lends it to the U.S. government. The government pays interest. Tether takes that interest for itself, and you only get the convenience of being able to quickly transfer dollars between exchanges. You're holding the USDT, you're holding the dollar. Pretty much the same thing. The only difference is that your dollar is working, funding the national debt. But the interest from that work doesn't go to you. The law has formalized this system. Moreover, the Genius Act excluded stablecoins from the definition of security under federal law, from the definition of commodity under the Commodity Exchange Act, and from the definition of investment company. Stablecoins became a separate category, not money, not securities, not commodities, something of its own. This gave issuers huge advantages. They were not subject to banking regulation. They didn't have to meet capital requirements like conventional banks. They could operate with minimal restrictions, making billions in profits. The law also gave stablecoin holders priority in the event of the issuer's bankruptcy. If the company collapses, token holders will get their money first before other creditors. Reserve assets will not be included in the bankruptcy estate. They are protected. Sounds like consumer protection, but there is a twist. If a large issuer like Tether collapses, it will have to sell 135 billion treasuries to get the money back to its holders. Massive sell-off, fire sale. This could crash the entire treasury bond market. Experts recalled history. In 2008 year, money market funds faced panic. Investors began to withdraw money en masse. Funds began selling off assets. The short-term lending market froze. The Fed had to step in and inject hundreds of billions in liquidity. In 2020, the same thing happened again. Pandemic, panic, massive withdrawals from money market funds. Again, emergency intervention by the Fed. Stablecoins were now occupying the same niche. Short instruments with high liquidity. But unlike money market funds, stablecoins were not under the full control of regulators. Analysts from the Ross Congress Foundation warned, legalization of stablecoins creates a parallel system of money circulation with limited ability of regulators to control liquidity flows. But there was another piece of legislation that passed almost simultaneously. Anti-CBDC Surveillance State Act, H.R. 1919, the Anti-Central Bank Digital Currency Surveillance State Act. The House of Representatives passed it in July of 2025. The law prohibited the Federal Reserve from issuing digital dollars directly to the public. The logic was simple: allow private companies to issue stable coins, but prohibit the government from issuing its own digital currency. Why? Officially, privacy protection. The Fed's digital dollar would give the government the ability to track every transaction of every citizen. Complete financial monitoring. Many Republicans called it a threat to liberty. But there was another aspect to it. If the Fed issued a digital dollar, it would be in direct competition with stablecoins. Why hold USDT when you can hold a real digital dollar issued by a central bank? The ban on CBDCs protected the business model of private stablecoin companies. I looked at this picture and understood. On the 18th of July, 2025, not just a law was passed, it was the institutionalization of a new financial system. Stablecoins received official status. Treasury bonds became mandatory collateral. Issuers got the right to earn billions on interest without sharing with token holders. The state got a ban on competition through its own digital currency. The system was set up, legally, publicly, with support from both parties. But the question remained, who launched the debt cancellation through crypto narrative? Where did the idea that exploded the crypto community on the 9th of November come from? And what I discovered next was that the story didn't start in Washington. It started on the other side of the world, the place where geopolitics meets finance. And the man who spoke the key words was not an American. September of the 2025 year, Vladivostok, Eastern Economic Forum. One of the panel discussions featured Anton Kobyakov, economic advisor to the president of Russia. The topic was broad: global finance, geopolitics, and the future of currency systems. Kobyakov said a phrase that went viral across the world's financial media in a few hours. He said that the United States is preparing a scheme to write off $35 trillion of public debt through cryptocurrencies. According to him, Washington is trying to rewrite the rules of the gold and cryptocurrency markets. The plan is simple: to transfer part of the debt into stablecoins, then devalue these liabilities through inflation, shifting the cost to the whole world. Kobyakov called it an old mechanism of inflation in a new package. Spread the costs of devaluation among millions of stablecoin holders around the world. Use private companies as issuers to create the appearance of neutrality, and then start with a clean slate. He warned that the world could be in a crypto cloud, where the dollar loses its dominance and financial stability becomes an illusion. The statement hit Reuters, Bloomberg, Al Jazeera. Within 24 hours, hundreds of publications were writing about it. The crypto community exploded. Forums, Telegram channels, Twitter, everywhere they were discussing one thing. Does this mean that debt cancellation through crypto is not a conspiracy theory, but a real plan? Of course, official Washington did not comment on the Russian advisor's words in any way, but the silence only fueled interest. And that's where the influencers come in. Balaji Srinivasan, former CTO of Coinbase, entrepreneur investor with nearly 1 million subscribers, published a series of posts. He wrote that the U.S. national debt has grown by 25% since 2020 and now stands at $34.5 trillion. The government is spending more than it earns. The debt is growing exponentially. Srinivasan warned, a financially desperate state could go for aggressive measures. Confiscation of assets, as has happened before in history. He gave examples: gold in the USA in '33, bank accounts in Cyprus in 2013, the assets of oligarchs in Europe after 2022. His conclusion: Bitcoin is the only asset that the state cannot confiscate. Decentralized, outside the control of the authorities. Buy Bitcoin, gold, silver. Protect yourself. Robert Kiyosaki, author of the bestseller Rich Dad, Poor Dad, regularly published posts about the impending collapse of the dollar. America is bankrupt, he wrote. The debt is unsustainable. The only salvation is hard assets. Bitcoin, gold, silver, real estate. He called fiat money fake money and called for it to be discarded. Anthony Pompliano continued to bend his line. After Trump's dividend announcement, he wrote, "If the president does indeed hand out $2,000 in tariff revenue, history will look at the April alarmists as fools. Tariffs won't destroy the economy. They will strengthen it. Stimulus will not cause inflation if applied correctly." Michael Saylor, whose company MicroStrategy held 641,000 bitcoins, worth $65 billion, wrote in cryptic phrases, "Better keep going." The market interpreted this as a signal. Saylor was getting ready to buy more. And if Saylor is buying, it means he sees something others don't. Analyst Lark Davis compared the current situation to the year 2020. Back then, the $1,200 stimulus triggered Bitcoin growth of 50% in 5 weeks and 900% in a year. Davis did not promise a repeat, but he did hint that the new incentives should not be ignored. Kashif Raza warned of a tsunami of inflation. If the government hands out $400 billion in dividends, it will inevitably lead to higher prices. Bitcoin is the best hedge against the depreciation of money. Each influencer spoke in his own words. But the bottom line was the same. The fiat money system is bursting at the seams. The debt is unsustainable. Governments are desperately looking for a way out. Crypto is either part of the authorities' plan or an escape from their actions. Either way, buy it. No one explained the mechanics. No one showed the calculations. Everyone talked about fears, hopes, risks. Emotions took the place of analysis. It is important to realize it was not a malicious deception. Srinivasan, Kiyosaki, Pompliano, they genuinely believed what they were saying. They saw the risks in the traditional financial system. They genuinely saw crypto as an alternative. They acted out of conviction. But the result was the same. Millions of people listened to their words, believed, bought cryptocurrencies, and pushed prices up, creating demand. And demand created supply. More stable coins, more reserves in treasury bonds, more funding for U.S. government debt. The circle was closing. Kobiakov launched the narrative. Influencers reinforced it. The masses believed it. Capital poured into crypto. Stablecoin companies bought more treasuries. The government got even more cheap credit. I realized the argument wasn't about whether it was a hoax or the truth. The argument was about who controls the subpoena. While everyone was looking at Trump, Tether, and crypto influencers, few noticed a different picture, a global one. Because while America was legalizing stablecoins on the other side of the world, 2 other empires were preparing their moves. And what I discovered next revealed this was not an American scam. It was a global chess game for control of the future of money. While the crypto community was discussing Trump's statement and theories about debt relief, a very different game was unfolding on the other side of the planet. On the 18th of July, as Trump was signing the Genius Act, a closed-door meeting of the People's Bank of China was being held in Beijing. The topic: the digital yuan and the strategy to counter dollar stablecoins. By this point, ECNY, the digital yuan, was the largest CBDC pilot project in the world. Hundreds of millions of users. Integration with payment systems. Managed anonymity. Government sees all transactions but promises not to abuse. But there was a problem. People were afraid of total control. A digital yuan managed by a central bank meant complete transparency of all payments to the government. This frightened not only the Chinese, but also potential foreign users. And then China saw a solution in the American approach. Stablecoins. Private companies issue tokens linked to the national currency, formally independent of the state, but under its control through regulation. By the autumn of 2025, the first signals had emerged. Beijing was considering allowing yuan-denominated stablecoins, not instead of ECNY, but in addition to it, for international trade for those who do not want direct state control. If America uses the USDT and USDC to export the dollar around the world, why can't China do the same with the yuan? In Europe, the reaction was different. The European Central Bank has been working on the digital euro since the year 2020. slowly, cautiously, with endless consultations. By the year 2025, the project was still under preparation, but the legalization of stablecoins in the US has forced Europeans to speed up. Brussels has started talking about the threat of backdoor dollarization. If USDT and USDC become the main means of payment in Europe, it will undermine monetary sovereignty. The ECB would lose control over the money supply. MiCAR, Markets and Crypto Assets Regulation, came into force in June 2024. Strict regulation of crypto assets, high capital requirements, strict disclosure rules, restrictions on issuance volumes for non-EU issuers. The aim was clear: to protect the European financial market from external stablecoins, to prepare the ground for a digital euro. 3 empires, 3 strategies, 1 goal: control. The US has chosen the path of private stablecoins: legalize, regulate, but not issue a government-issued digital currency. Let Tether and Circle do the work of exporting the dollar. The government gets cheap funding through treasuries. Companies make billions, and technically everything looks like a free market. China has chosen a hybrid path: digital yuan under full state control for the domestic market, yuan stablecoins for international trade. 2 tools, 1 goal: to dislodge the dollar from the position of the main reserve currency. Europe tried to defend itself. The digital euro is an alternative to both CBDC and stablecoins. Tight regulation for external players. ECB retaining control over monetary policy. The result? Fragmentation. The global digital payment landscape has splintered along geopolitical lines. The US zone with dollar-denominated stablecoins. The Chinese zone with digital yuan and yuan-denominated stablecoins. European zone with digital euro and strict controls. The Bank for International Settlements tried to build bridges. Project Agora, a platform for interbank settlements using tokenized deposits. Project Cedar, experiments with cross-border CBDC payments. But technological bridges did not solve political contradictions. Stablecoin transaction volume exceeded $4 trillion in 2024. More than Visa. Almost half of the world's institutional investors have used stablecoins for payments and trading. Whoever controls these flows controls the future of global finance. I looked at this picture and realized nobody was going to write off the debt. Everyone was fighting for control over a new form of money. Digital money is not a replacement for the old system. It's a battleground between empires. But as the 3 giants fought over the future, I realized the most important thing. The dispute was not about technology. It was about who would pay for the transition to a new system. And the answer to that question was simpler than I thought. Let's go back to the beginning. 9th of November. Trump's statement. Explosion of the crypto market. Telegram channels are full of cries. The national debt will be written off through crypto. All the pieces of the puzzle now fit together. The US debt is $37 trillion, a figure that is unimaginable. If you put 37 trillion $1 notes in a line, it would stretch to the moon and back 42 times. This debt won't go away. It can't be canceled. It can't be erased with the push of a button. But it can be shifted. Change the form. Change creditors. And that's exactly what happened. U.S. government debt used to be held by countries: China, Japan, Great Britain, central banks, pension funds, large institutional investors. They all knew what they were doing. All knowingly bought treasury bonds. Now the picture has changed. Tether holds $135 billion. Circle holds $50. BlackRock, Franklin Templeton, a few billion more. In total, About $200 billion of government debt is in the hands of crypto companies. Where did they get the money from? From you, from me, from the millions of people around the world who buy USDT or USDC to trade on crypto exchanges, to transfer dollars quickly without banks, to store stable currency in a digital wallet. Every time you buy USDT for $1, that dollar doesn't stay in the safe. Tether takes it and buys a U.S. Treasury bond, effectively giving a loan to the U.S. government. The government pays 5% interest per annum. Tether takes that interest for itself. $7 billion profit a year. You get a token, convenience, liquidity, ability to trade quickly, but you also become a creditor of the U.S. government. Unwittingly, unknowingly, but a creditor. And it's not a scam. It's a legal system, enshrined in the Genius Act. All reports are public. All the mechanisms are transparent. It's all legal. But that doesn't change the point. Market forecast. Stablecoin capitalization will grow from $270 billion in year 2025 to $2 trillion by year 2028. If the current reserve structure continues, and that's what the Genius Act requires, private crypto companies will hold about $1.5 trillion in treasuries. $1.5 trillion. That's more than the entire U.S. debt to China and Japan combined. Debt doesn't disappear. It changes hands. From the hands of governments and central banks into the hands of private companies. From the hands of conscious investors into the wallets of millions of people who just wanted to buy Bitcoin on the exchange. But there is a cost to this system. The risk is called a fire sale, a panic sale. History knows examples. 2008 year, the crisis of money market funds. Investors began to withdraw money en masse. Funds started selling off treasuries and corporate bonds to get their money back. The short-term lending market shut down. The Fed had to inject hundreds of billions in liquidity to prevent a collapse. Year 2020 is a repeat. Pandemic, panic, massive withdrawal from money market funds, emergency intervention by the Fed again. Stablecoins now occupy the same niche. Short instruments with the promise of instant liquidity. But if a major issuer collapses, and crypto has a history of collapses, think of Terra USTC in 2022, or the panic around USDC after Silicon Valley Bank collapsed. It will have to urgently sell hundreds of billions of treasuries, 135 billion on the market at one time. It's not just a sell-off, it's a tsunami. Bond prices will fall, yields will soar. The cost of servicing the debt for the government will rise. Banks, pension funds, and insurance companies that also hold treasuries will suffer losses. Systemic risk. Regulators understand this. That's why the Genius Act gave stablecoin holders priority in bankruptcy. Reserves are protected, but protection only works if things happen in an organized way. In a panic, order is the first to disappear. I looked at this system and realized, this is not a conspiracy. This is not one man's plan. This is evolution. The financial system is adapting. The dollar is looking for new forms. The national debt is looking for new creditors. Private companies find a way to make billions in intermediation. Everyone is acting rationally. Tether maximizes profits. The government gets cheap funding. Users get convenience. No one wants collapse. No one plans to cheat. But the system is set up so that you bear the risk. Not Tether. Not the government. You. When you hold USDT, you hold a promise. A promise that Tether will exchange the token for dollars at any time. A promise that the treasuries are liquid. A promise that the system is stable. But promises only work as long as everyone believes them. Debt cancellation via crypto is a myth. No one is going to write off 37 trillion. The story is not about cancellation. The story is about 37 trillion changing hands. Debt used to be held by governments and banks. Now it is held by millions of people around the world in their crypto wallets without even knowing it. It's not a scam, it's an evolution. But in this evolution, you are not the predator. You are the prey. I began this investigation with a simple question. Can $37 trillion of debt be canceled through cryptocurrency? The answer is no. You can't. But I found something more important. Anton Kobyakov in Vladivostok launched a narrative about writing off through crypto. Influencers picked it up. Millions believed it. Capital flooded into the crypto. The system got even more funding. And while the US was legalizing stablecoins, China was preparing yuan alternatives, and Europe was building defenses through the digital euro. Three empires are vying for control over the future of money. But that's not what matters. It's all about who pays. Every time you buy USDT or USDC, you become a creditor of the US government. Your money is funding the national debt. Issuers make billions in interest. The government gets cheap credit, and you get convenience. But convenience comes at a price. If the system cracks, you bear the risk. This is neither good nor bad. It's reality, but knowing it is better than not knowing it. And traditionally, as always, you're Mr. Dark Web. $190 million lay on a wallet whose owner was buried in a closed coffin. But 4 years after the burial, the bitcoins on the wallets began to move. Either we're looking at the perfect crime, or we're looking at the perfect disappearance. I've been studying digital crime for years. I've seen schemes that have ruined thousands of people in a matter of hours. I've seen hackers disappear with millions without leaving a trace. But Gerald Cotton's story stands apart because it was done in the open, in front of regulators, journalists, and the 76,000 people who trusted him with their money. On the 9th of December, 2018, doctors at Fortis Escorts Hospital in Jaipur, India, recorded the death of a 30-year-old Canadian man. The cause was complications of Crohn's disease, which turned into septic shock. 2 cardiac arrests in 24 hours. He didn't survive the second one. Time of death was 19 hours and 26 minutes local time. The body was embalmed at SMS Medical College, placed in a closed casket, and shipped across the ocean to Halifax, Nova Scotia. No autopsy was performed. On the death certificate issued by the Rajasthan state government, the deceased's surname was misspelled Cottonen instead of Cotton. At first glance, a tragic accident. A young entrepreneur dies on his honeymoon from a chronic illness. It happens. But the devil, as always, was in the details. Gerald Cotton was more than just an entrepreneur. He was the founder and sole operator of Quadriga CX, Canada's largest cryptocurrency exchange. Hundreds of millions of dollars passed through his platform. And he was the only person on the planet who knew the passwords to the wallets where customers' money was stored. When his heart stopped, those passwords died with him. At least that's what his widow claimed. It took a month for the world to learn of Cotton's death. It took a month. A whole month, during which the exchange continued to accept deposits from unsuspecting customers. On the 14th of January, 2019, A short message about the founder's death appeared on the Quadriga CX Facebook page. 2 weeks later, on the 31st of January, Cotton's widow Jennifer Robertson filed an application for protection from creditors in the Supreme Court of Nova Scotia. In her affidavit, she said something incredible. Her husband managed the entire exchange from a single laptop. He solely controlled access to the so-called cold wallets, offline vaults where most of the client funds were allegedly located. The passwords were not written down anywhere, and she, despite all attempts, could not find them. 215 million Canadian dollars, or roughly 190 million American dollars, were locked up forever. 76,000 people were left with nothing. The news exploded like a bomb. The crypto community exploded with conspiracy theories. People refused to believe in such a coincidence. The founder of an exchange dies just when customers have been unable to withdraw their money for months? Signs a will 12 days before his death? Dies in a country where you can buy any document, and yet leaves no way to access the funds? Jesse Powell, head of rival exchange Kraken, publicly called the circumstances of the death bizarre and, frankly, unbelievable. On Reddit and in Telegram channels, people ask the same question. Is Gerald Cotton definitely dead? The court appointed Ernst & Young as an independent monitor to look into Quadriga CX's affairs, and what the auditors discovered was scarier than any conspiracy theories. The cold wallets in which the client's funds were supposedly stored were empty. Not locked, not encrypted, just empty. The money was gone long before Cotton's death. He withdrew it over several years, transferring it to personal accounts on other exchanges where he engaged in risky margin trading, and he lost, losing big. The Ontario Securities Commission later calculated the losses. $28 million Cotton lost on external exchanges. Another $115 million on his own platform, trading against his own customers using fictitious accounts. The main of these accounts was named Chris Marquez. Cotton created it in order to deposit non-existent money into it. Fake Canadian dollars and bitcoins that had no real collateral. He then used these phantom funds to trade with real customers. When someone sold him bitcoins for dollars, all he received were numbers on a screen. The real cryptocurrency was going under Cotton's control. When customers wanted to withdraw their money, Cotton paid them from the deposits of new users. A classic Ponzi scheme, only wrapped in blockchain and fancy words about decentralization. In June of 2020, the Ontario Securities Commission gave its final verdict. What happened at Quadriga is old-fashioned fraud wrapped in modern technology. But it's one thing to know you've been robbed. It's quite another to realize who really did it, because the deeper the investigators dug, the more clearly behind the back of the smiling Gerald Cotton, another figure emerged. A man whose name was not in the news. A man who had officially left the company 2 years before the collapse. A man with 3 names, 2 convictions, and 1 very dark history. His name was Michael Patron, or Omar Patron, or Omar Danani, depending on which country and decade you met him in. And his shadow has fallen over this story from day one. In the summer of 2003, a 15-year-old high school student from the sleepy Canadian town of Belleville, Ontario, registered on a forum called Talk Gold. He chose the nickname Scepter and gave no information about himself. No age, no name, no picture, just an avatar and a desire to make money. Talk Gold was no ordinary forum. It was a place where operators and victims of so-called HYP, high-yield investment programs, gathered. Programs that promised insane returns, 50, 100, 200% per month. Behind the beautiful websites and loud promises, there was nothing but a classic pyramid scheme. The money of new depositors went to pay the old ones until the flow dried up. Then the operator disappeared, and the forum was filled with the cries of the deceived. For most, it was playing with fire. For Scepter, it was a school of life. As early as January 2004, when he was barely 15, he launched his own scheme called S&S Investments. The site promised steady profits and swore that it was not a pyramid scheme or a Ponzi scheme. Things went smoothly for a few months. Then the money ran out. His posts from that period have been preserved on the forum. Scepter begged investors to wait, promised to return the funds, and threatened that any threats against him would automatically forfeit the sender's right to a refund. More than 200 people were left without money. Some lost hundreds of dollars. One user wrote that he invested $3,000. But the most interesting thing happened next. While Scepter was trying to deal with one scheme, he started another. Lucky Invest. And at some point he forgot to switch the account. Answering a question in the Lucky Invest thread, he accidentally posted on behalf of Scepter. Other users immediately noticed it. His response was frank to the point of cynicism. "I'm not trying to hide. Lucky Invest is a game. There are no returns in this game. Only I share my profits." A 15-year-old schoolboy already understood the main rule. As long as the victims believe that this is an investment, they are victims. As soon as they realize that it is a game, they are to blame. This schoolboy's name was Gerald Cotton, but he was not alone on Talk Gold. 3 months earlier, in April 2003, another user had appeared on the forum. His nickname was simpler, just Patron. He was older, more experienced, and already had real criminal experience under his belt. Patron operated a network of digital currency exchangers called VFS Network, Voleur Financial Services. Voleur means thief in French. He wasn't very secretive about what he was doing. On Talk Gold, users had a function to add friends. Archives from the year 2013 show that Patron had only one person on his friends list, Scepter. Scepter also had only one person on his friends list, Patron. Two loners found each other in the dark corners of the early internet. The older one taught the younger one. Their posts appeared in the same threads. They defended the same projects, promoted the same exchanges. In 2008 year, they together launched Midas Gold, a Liberty Reserve e-currency exchanger. According to the documents, the owner was Omar Patrin. The service operated until 2013 and regularly collected complaints about delayed or disappeared customer funds. But by then, Patron had bigger problems than forum complaints, because his real name wasn't Michael Patron, or even Omar Patron. His name was Omar Danani. And in the year 2004, when Scepter was just learning how to scam people on Talk Gold, 20-year-old Danani was already in an American prison. He was a member of Shadow Crew, one of the first organized cybercrime groups in the history of the internet. It wasn't just a forum. It was a full-fledged marketplace of stolen data. Credit card numbers, bank accounts, forged documents. More than 1.5 million stolen cards passed through Shadow Crew. Danani worked under the alias Voleur. His specialty was money laundering. You send him cash, he deposits it into an anonymous e-gold account. 10% commission, no questions asked. In October of 2004, the U.S. Secret Service busted Shadow Crew in Operation Firewall. 28 arrests worldwide. Danani was caught because he wasn't using a proxy. His real IP address showed up in the logs. In November 2005, he pleaded guilty to conspiracy to transfer identification documents. The sentence was 18 months in federal prison. After his release in May 2007, he was deported to Canada, and that's where the fun part comes in. Back in Canada, Omar Danini did what people who want a fresh start do. He changed his name, first to Omar Patrin, then to Michael Patrin. Official documentation of the name change was confirmed by the Canadian government and later made its way into the Globe and Mail's investigative files. When reporters asked Patrin directly, he denied ever being Omar Danini, denied jail time, denied any connection to Shadow Crew, but the documents spoke for themselves. In November 2013, Quadriga FinTech Solutions was incorporated in Vancouver. The official face and founder was Gerald Cotton, a young graduate of York University's Schulich School of Business with an impeccable reputation, no criminal record, no scandals, the perfect face for a cryptocurrency startup. The co-founder was Michael Patrin, a man with a dark past that no one has ever unearthed. The distribution of roles was obvious. Cotton is the facade, the public figure, the guy who smiles at the camera and explains to journalists how Bitcoin works. Patrin is the shadow, the architect, the man who knows how the schemes work from the inside. They had known each other for over a decade. They had grown up together on forums where cheating was a norm and trust was a weakness. And now they were building Canada's largest crypto exchange. Patrin officially left Quadriga CX in 2016, but his then-girlfriend Levi Horner remained one of the company's largest shareholders until the very end. And Patrin himself, as it would later turn out, never disappeared. He just changed his mask again. In January of 2014, Canada's second Bitcoin ATM appeared on a busy Vancouver street. A smiling young man in glasses stood next to it, helping two young children insert a $100 note into the machine. Cameras were filming, journalists were asking questions. It was the perfect PR moment for a young industry. The man's name was Gerald Cotton. He was 25 years old, and he looked like the kind of guy you'd want to trust. An open face, a relaxed manner of speech, a genuine enthusiasm for technology. He explained to journalists that Bitcoin was the future of finance, that Quadriga CX was a safe and transparent way to enter the world of cryptocurrencies, that client funds were stored in secure offline wallets. "We just send the money to paper wallets and keep it in bank safes," he said in an interview. "We don't have to go to the bank every time. Everything is automated and secure." It sounded convincing. People believed it. By the year 2017, Quadriga CX had become Canada's largest cryptocurrency exchange. Hundreds of millions of dollars were flowing through the platform. At its peak, the exchange had over 300,000 registered accounts. Cotton gave interviews, spoke at conferences, and met with potential investors. He was the face of the Canadian crypto industry. But behind the beautiful facade lurked a very different reality. Quadriga CX was never a real stock exchange. From the very beginning, it was a machine for producing illusions, and the main illusionist was Cotton himself. The Ontario Securities Commission spent months rebuilding a picture of what went on inside the company. Their final report reads like a guilty verdict. Cotton created several fictitious accounts on his own platform. The main one belonged to a non-existent user named Chris Marquet. To this account, Cotton deposited money that didn't exist, fake Canadian dollars and phantom bitcoins. These figures had no real collateral. They just appeared in the database because Cotton had complete control over the system. He then used these phantom funds to trade with real clients. The scheme worked simply. Let's say a client wants to sell one Bitcoin for $10,000. On the other side of the transaction is Chris Marquet, with his endless supply of non-existent money. The transaction goes through. The customer sees $10,000 in his account. He's happy. He thinks he's made money. But that $10,000 is just numbers on a screen. There's no real money behind them. But the client's real Bitcoin now belongs to Cotton. When a client tried to withdraw his dollars, problems began. Delays of days, then weeks. The support service responded with boilerplate messages about technical difficulties and problems with banks. Some people did get their money, but only at the expense of other clients' deposits. A classic Ponzi scheme in its purest form. Cotton didn't just steal, he was also gambling. He sent the withdrawn bitcoins to other exchanges, Poloniex, Bitfinex, Kraken, and engaged in high-leverage margin trading there. It's like playing casino games with other people's money, only the stakes are measured in millions. He lost, lots and lots. Investigators estimate that Cotton lost about $28 million in client funds on external exchanges. Another $115 million evaporated inside Quadriga CX itself, the result of trading in fictitious assets that never existed. But on the outside, everything looked safe. Cotton kept smiling for the camera, buying property, flew his own plane, owned a yacht. His fiancée, Jennifer Robertson, did not deny herself anything. 16 properties in Nova Scotia and British Columbia were in her name or in the names of companies she controlled. Ernst & Young estimates that approximately $24 million of client funds went to personal expenses for Cotton and his entourage. That's not counting trading losses. Just money spent on living the good life. At the same time, chaos reigned within the company. Quadriga CX had not kept any accounting records since 2016. The company's client funds and operating money were not segregated. Everything was in one pile, and only Cotton knew where everything was. A separate problem was banks. Canadian financial institutions were suspicious of cryptocurrency exchanges and refused to open accounts for them. Cotton found a workaround. He used third-party payment processors. Customers sent money not directly to Quadriga CX, but to the accounts of intermediaries, who then transferred the funds to the exchange. These intermediaries were often dubious offices without proper licenses. The money was kept in personal accounts, sometimes in Cotton's own accounts, sometimes in the accounts of random people who agreed to act as pads for a percentage. When banks noticed suspicious activity, they froze the accounts. The money hung around for months. In 2018, CIBC Bank froze $26 million in the accounts of one of Quadriga CX's payment processors. The formal reason was suspicious transactions. This money was never returned to customers during Cotton's lifetime. By the autumn of 2018, the situation had become critical. The cryptocurrency market collapsed. Bitcoin lost more than 80% of its value from the December highs of the previous year. Customers tried to withdraw funds en masse, but there was nothing to withdraw. The wallets had been empty for a long time. The complaints multiplied. On Reddit and in Telegram groups, people shared stories about months of waiting. Quadriga CX support either didn't respond or sent copy pasta about technical work. Cotton continued to publicly state that the problems were temporary and related to the banking system. On the 27th of November, 2018, he signed his will. The entire estate went to his wife, Jennifer Robertson. A separate clause in the document specified a trust for $100,000 for the lifetime maintenance of his two chihuahuas, Nitro and Gully. 12 days later, Gerald Cotton died in an Indian hospital, or not dead, because what happened after his death raised more questions than it answered. On the 8th of December, 2018, a private jet landed at Jaipur International Airport. There were 2 people on board, Gerald Cotton and his wife Jennifer Robertson. They had traveled to India for their honeymoon. Although they had been officially married a few months earlier, Cotton was telling acquaintances that he was going to India to open an orphanage for orphans. A beautiful story for a man whose clients at that time could not withdraw their money. But at the time, no one knew the scale of the disaster. Around 5 p.m. local time, the couple checked into the Oberoi Rajvilas, one of the most luxurious hotels in the city. It's a place where guests are greeted at the entrance by guards in traditional garb, where corridors smell of rose petals, and rooms cost hundreds of dollars a night. A palace for modern-day Maharajas. But within a few hours, something went wrong. At 21:45 local time, Gerald Cotton was taken to Fortis Escorts Hospital in critical condition. According to medical records, he complained of vomiting, diarrhea, and abdominal pain. He had a high fever. Doctors diagnosed septic shock, bowel perforation, and intestinal obstruction, severe complications of Crohn's disease, which he had suffered from since he was 24 years old. The next day, the 9th of December, around noon, his heart stopped. The doctors performed resuscitation, started his heart again. But at 18:30, there was a second stop. This time, the resuscitation did not help. At 1926, Gerald William Cotton was pronounced dead. He was 30 years old. That is the official version. It is supported by hospital records, a death certificate from the Rajasthan state government, and a statement from J.A. Snow Funeral Home in Halifax. Everything looks like a tragic accident. A young man with a chronic disease dies of complications far from home. But dig a little deeper and the picture starts to crack at the seams. Let's start with the paperwork. On the death certificate, the deceased's surname is written as Cotton with an A instead of an E. A little thing? Maybe. But in an official document that is supposed to confirm the identity of the deceased, such errors raise questions. There was no autopsy. It is at least unusual for a foreigner to die under strange circumstances in another country. The body was embalmed at the anatomy department of SMS Medical College, Jaipur, and sent to Canada in a closed coffin. Anatomy professor Diraj Saxena, who worked at the college, later explained to the Globe and Mail, "As far as the cause of death is concerned, it's none of our business. Our job is just to inject chemicals into the body for preservation. No further testing, no forensics." Then there was silence. Cotton died on the 9th of December, but the world didn't learn about it until the 14th of January the following year, more than a month later. All this time, Quadriga CX continued to operate. It kept accepting deposits from customers. People were transferring money to a platform whose owner was already lying in his grave. Why the delay? Jennifer Robertson, in her testimony, explained it as shock and the need to deal with the situation. But to many, this explanation sounded unconvincing. There's another detail that came out later. A woman named Jennifer Sibley ran the hangar where Cotton kept his plane. She last contacted him on the 20th of November, 18 days before his death. He texted her, "I'm in Toronto right now, about to fly to India to open an orphanage. I'm a little overstretched financially. I apologize for the inconvenience." After his death, Sibley called Robertson to see how the orphanage was progressing. The widow's reply was odd. "Jerry's dead. Promise not to tell anyone." Robertson did not explain why her husband's death needed to be kept secret. The will is a separate story. Cotton signed it on the 27th of November, 1828, 12 days before his death. In it, he left his entire estate to his wife and appointed her executor. The value of his personal estate was estimated at 9.6 million Canadian dollars, an aeroplane, a yacht, a 2017 Lexus, real estate in Nova Scotia and British Columbia, and yes, $100,000 in a trust fund for 2 chihuahuas. A man in his 30s with a chronic but controllable illness suddenly decides to get his affairs in order a fortnight before his death. Coincidence? Maybe. But in the context of everything else, another red flag in a long line of red flags. By December of 2019, lawyers representing injured Quadriga CX clients had lost patience. Miller Thompson sent a formal letter to the Royal Canadian Mounted Police demanding that Gerald Cotton's body be exhumed. They wanted 2 things. The first was to confirm that Cotton was really in the grave and not someone else. The second was to conduct a full forensic examination to determine the real cause of death. Given the questionable circumstances of Mr. Cotton's death and the number of people affected, we feel it is necessary to dispel any doubts. The letter read, "The exhumation was never carried out. At least there is no public information about it. Gerald Cotton's grave in a cemetery in Nova Scotia remains untouched, and the question of who lies in it is still open." Robertson, in her testimony, complained of bullying. She wrote that she was being threatened and insulted on the internet, that people were accusing her of complicity, that they questioned the very death of her husband, including questions about whether he is actually dead. She wrote in court documents. She insisted she knew nothing about her husband's affairs, that she had no access to his computer, that he never discussed business with her, that she was just as much a victim as anyone else. But the court was skeptical of her testimony. In the end, Robertson agreed to return about $12 million in assets. Real estate, an airplane, cars. She was allowed to keep $90,000 in cash, a wedding ring, and an old Jeep. $12 million out of $215, a drop in the ocean. But the questions remain. Is Cotton really dead? If so, who helped him plan his disappearance? If not, where is he now? Most importantly, who moved bitcoins 4 years after the funeral? February 2019. Ernst & Young, appointed by the court to manage the Quadriga CX bankruptcy, began a massive effort to locate client funds. The task seemed simple. Find the cold wallets Cotton spoke of, access them, and return the money to the victims. The reality was much darker. Auditors found 6 wallets that were allegedly used as Quadriga CX cold storage. They hired data recovery specialists, cryptographers, blockchain experts. Months of work, thousands of hours of analysis. The result was 0. The wallets were empty, not locked, not encrypted with a dead password, just empty. The last significant transactions had taken place months before Cotton's death. The money was long gone, to external exchanges, to personal accounts, to nowhere. But in the process, an incident occurred that later took on a completely different meaning. In February of 2019, Ernst & Young accidentally sent 103 bitcoins to one of these cold wallets. A technical error. The money went to an address to which access was supposedly lost forever. The auditors recorded the loss and moved on. Those 103 bitcoins became another line in a long list of losses. Everyone resigned themselves to the fact that they were gone forever. It's been almost 4 years. On the 17th of December, 2022, blockchain analysts recorded activity on wallets associated with Quadriga CX. For the first time since February 2019, 104 bitcoins, including the very funds that were accidentally sent, began to move. 69 bitcoins were sent through a Wasabi mixer, a service specifically designed to sever the connection between sender and receiver. Traces were lost in a digital fog. Ernst & Young immediately issued a statement. They did not initiate these transactions. They don't have access to these wallets. They have no idea who did it. The crypto community has exploded. 4 years of silence, and suddenly the dead wallets came back to life. Versions multiplied. Hackers had cracked old keys. Some of the former employees had retained access. Cotton himself had risen from the grave. Jennifer Robertson made the comment through her lawyer. She said she was shocked and fears a new wave of conspiracy theories. She insisted she had nothing to do with the movement of funds. The investigation continues to this day, but the main question remains unanswered. If Cotton is dead, who controls his purses? And while the world was watching the ghostly bitcoins, another ghost returned from the past, and his return was no less dramatic. In January 2022, almost a year before the Quadriga CX wallet movement, a scandal erupted in the world of decentralized finance. The Wonderland Protocol, which managed hundreds of millions of dollars in crypto assets, was at the center of an expose. It turned out that the treasurer of the project, the person who controlled the finances of the entire system, was someone under the pseudonym 0xSifu, an anonymous crypto genius to whom the community entrusted its money. A blockchain detective under the nickname ZachXBT investigated and identified 0xSifu. It was Michael Patrine, the same patron who co-founded Quadriga CX, the same man with 3 first names and a criminal record for cybercrime. 6 years after leaving Quadriga CX, 4 years after the death of his partner, Patron was back at the helm of a financial platform managing other people's money. Daniele Sesta, Wonderland's founder, admitted he knew about Patron's past. According to him, he believed people deserved a second chance. The community disagreed with him. The price of the Wonderland token collapsed. Patron was forced to leave, but the very fact that he was there raised uncomfortable questions. The man behind one of the largest crypto frauds in Canadian history quietly took a job as treasurer of another project. No background checks, no questions asked. He simply changed his mask and continued working. And if he could do that, why not assume Cotton did the same? Changed his mask, changed countries, started over. In September of the year 2025, in modern times, Patron's story was given another chapter. The Supreme Court of British Columbia ordered his assets confiscated in favor of the state. 45 gold bars, $250,000 in cash, a collection of Rolex watches, a loaded Ruger .45 caliber pistol. The total cost is about $1 million. Patron didn't appear in court and didn't challenge the confiscation. Just let them take what they found. Silently. No explanation. Where is he now? What's he doing? How much more does he have hidden? No one knows. The shadow disappeared into the darkness again, and 76,000 people are still waiting for their money. In May of 2023, Quadriga CX creditors finally received their money. After 4 years of litigation, bankruptcy, and investigations, Ernst & Young announced the completion of the asset distribution process. 76,000 people who lost their savings received 13.9 hundredths of a percent of their claims. Moreover, The value of the assets was calculated at the exchange rate as of the 15th of April, 2019 years ago, long before Bitcoin rose several times. 13%. If you invested $100,000, you got 13% back. If you put in $1 million, $130,000. And that's at the old rate. All told, they managed to collect about $46 million in assets. That's all that's left of Gerald Cotton's empire. The rest, $169 million, evaporated, gambled away on the stock exchanges, spent on yachts and aeroplanes, dissolved into the blockchain. Netflix has released a documentary called Trust No One. Journalists wrote dozens of articles. The Ontario Securities Commission released a scathing report. Everyone learned the truth about how Quadriga CX worked, but the main question remained unanswered. Was Gerald Cotton still alive? Let's look at the facts. A man who has been building pyramid schemes since he was 15 years old. A man whose closest partner is a convicted cybercriminal who changed his name twice. A man who has been stealing clients' money for years and knew that sooner or later everything would collapse. This man signs a will 12 days before his death, flies to India, a country where you can get any document for money, dies in a private hospital under unclear circumstances. The body is not opened, buried in a closed coffin on the other side of the planet, and 4 years later, his wallets come to life. I'm not saying he's alive. I have no proof. Crohn's disease is a serious disease, and people do die from its complications. Septic shock kills quickly and mercilessly. It could have happened exactly as described in the documents. But I also can't say he's dead, because no one has seen the body. No one has conducted an independent examination. The exhumation demanded by the victim's lawyers never took place. We're dealing with a man who's been scamming people his whole life. Who created fake accounts and fake money? Who has spent years looking at the camera and lying with a genuine smile on his face? Why should we believe that his death is the only truth in this whole story? There are people who believe that Cotton is now living on an island somewhere under an alias, that he has a new identity, a new look, a new life, that $169 million is enough money to disappear forever. There are those who believe the official version. The young crook got carried away, lost control of the situation, and died of illness at the most inopportune moment. Tragedy? Yes. Justice? Maybe. And there's a third version, the darkest. That Cotton didn't just fake his death, he was murdered by people he owed money to, those whose money he lost on the stock exchanges, people who aren't used to settling things in court. The truth is, we don't know, and we may never know. The story of Quadriga CX is not just the story of one scam. It is a mirror that reflects the entire crypto industry of the 2010s, a time when anyone could open an exchange in a garage and manage millions of other people's dollars, when regulators didn't understand what was going on, when the word decentralization was used as an incantation to remove any responsibility. Cotton was no genius. His scheme is a classic Ponzi scheme that is over 100 years old. He just wrapped it in fancy words and put it on the cryptocurrency wave, and 76,000 people believed it. Patron wasn't invisible. His past could have been found in a couple of hours of open source work, but no one was looking. No one checked. Everyone was too busy chasing profits. This is the main lesson of Quadriga CX. Not cryptocurrencies are scam. Not all exchanges are scams. It's something simpler and scarier. Greed shuts down critical thinking. When you're promised easy money, you stop asking questions. You stop checking IDs. You stop wondering who's behind the pretty website. You just want to believe that this time you'll get lucky. And that's what all the schemes are based on, from Talk Gold in 2003 to Quadriga CX in 2018, until the next scam that is gaining momentum somewhere on the internet right now. My name is Mr. Dark Web. I told you the story of a man who stole $200 million and may still be alive. The story of his partner who changed his name 3 times and is still at large. The story of 76,000 people who got 13% of their money and will never get answers. Gerald Cotton's grave is located in a cemetery in Nova Scotia. The headstone is engraved with his name and dates of life. Next to it is a spot reserved for his wife. But until this grave is opened, we won't know for sure who lies in it. And the bitcoins in his wallets continue to move occasionally. It's like a reminder that in the world of cryptocurrencies, the dead don't always stay dead. That was Quadriga CX's story. Keep an eye on your keys and don't trust anyone.